Okay, it's the morning after the night before, and time for us on the Sky Cricket Podcast to rake over the ashes of England's heaviest defeat by runs since the Second World War. They went down in Rajkot by a whopping 434 runs. And Nasser, even in the dog days of England cricket in the 90s, we didn't get beat by that margin. I was looking actually, and can you remember where your heaviest defeat was?
There are so many, Ath. I mean, I'm
So many
guessing
to choose.
so many to remember. I'm guessing Australia. Tell me it was someone else apart from Australia, please.
Well, it was the great game at Brisbane
Oh,
where
don't
you
start.
shoved them in and lost by 384. And my heaviest defeat was South Africa at Lords, which is a game I'm going to brush over rather quickly.
Was that dirt in the pocket?
We lost by 356, but we've been put in the shade by the Bazballers who went down by 434 runs. Where should we start? Where did the game? Where did England lose it?
Well, firstly, it was a great game of cricket. Watching here from sunny Essex, it was magnificent. Another 4 days of brilliant Test match cricket on a brilliant Test match pitch. And at the end of day two, everyone was raving about Bazball, criticising Rohit Sharma, saying, he got it wrong with Duckett and should have bowled Ashwin earlier. And it's been an incredible turnaround in the last 2 days. And for me, everyone will look how meekly England collapsed late yesterday. But actually, the game for me and the damage was done on first innings. I know they got away with it in the first Test match, thanks to a brilliant 190 from Ollie Pope to get them back in the game. But those occurrences are rare, I'd say, in India. If you give a heavy first innings lead to the opposition, generally in India, if you're playing catch-up cricket, it will jump up and bite you on the backside late in the game. And that's what happened. I don't know, I can't remember for a long time such a quick and dramatic turnaround in a Test match game. Can you?
No, absolutely not. On that second evening, I came back to the hotel here in Rajkot, and there's a few England supporters in the hotel, and they were so high, having watched that innings from Ben Duckett, and writing about it, talking about it that evening, and slightly throwing it forward. I was thinking, well, this is a golden opportunity here to try and get a first innings lead, or at least parity on first innings, and then that third innings becomes a very pressure innings, and then obviously to add to those worries from India's perspective on that second evening, late on the second evening, Ravi Ashwin announced that he'd be, leaving the Test match for the family medical emergency. So when we got to the ground on the third morning, you felt that was England's great opportunity. So I agree. I often liken Test cricket to a bit of an arm wrestle. Each side is pushing the other, and there's not much movement. And then the collapse comes at the end, and it's made to look far more exaggerated than perhaps the game was. But on that third morning, I felt that was England's opportunity. And they missed an opportunity actually earlier, didn't they? Because Joe put down Rohit Sharma at slip, and India could have been 40 for 4 then. And it's a game of what ifs and buts, and who knows what would have happened there. But that third morning, when they collapsed and gave away a more than 100-run lead, I think, where the game was won and lost. So shall we have a look at Joe? I mean, the venerable cricket writer from the Telegraph, Sheil Berry, described it as the worst shot in the history of England cricket. I mean, he watched me and you for 20 years, so he's seen a few. What do you make of that comment, and what do you make of the shot?
He obviously doesn't remember my hook shot of Mackay and Tini when he had 3 men out on the hook at Lords and I got caught short leg diving forward. Probably one of the worst shots in the history of the game. I don't think it was the worst shot in the history of Test match cricket. No, certainly not. I think the situation, like you say, reminded me a little bit of Lords and the Ashes when Nathan Lyon hobbled off and England had a great opportunity there to just be ruthless and assess the situation and say they're a bowler down, they're a bowler short, we are going to make them suffer here. And that it's nothing wrong with the Joe Root shot. Joe Root plays that shot as well as anyone. He's played it historically. When he plays it first morning of an Ashes day, we all jump up and go, wow. Everyone is saying what a great shot. It set the tone for the day. So you have to say that there's nothing wrong with the shot. It is the timing of the shot. You know, they are a bowler down, a great bowler down in Ravi Ashwin. They have Jadeja, who's just coming back from an injury and is being underbowled and has been looked after by the captain, Rohit Sharma. So the pitch is still very good on day 3. Bumrah, talk of him being rested. He's also your nemesis, getting you out. See off that spell. Make Bumrah get to his second spell, third spell. Make Jadeja, who's coming back from injury, bowl more and more and more. And then later in the day, that's when you go at them and play all your fancy shots. So, you know, England, as they do, they've doubled down on it. Joe Root has got 11,500 test match runs. He knows exactly what he's doing. It's difficult to argue against that. But I think there was a time there just to be smarter and to be a bit more switched on. I don't know how you saw it.
Pretty much the same way. In terms of the reverse scoop or whatever shot you want to call it, I just see that now as like a cover drive or a cut shot, with the one exception is that it has to be a premeditated shot. And Bumrah is a difficult bowler, I would have thought, to premeditate against. We saw Ollie Pope try and reverse scoop him, didn't we, in Hyderabad at the end of the innings and got bowled. But just because he can be a very consistent bowler, but he's also a bowler who can put in the odd Yorker, slow a ball, and therefore to predetermine your shot against him, I would have thought, is a little bit tricky. But the game situation, I think, you're exactly right. I thought, actually, Joe looked better in this game than he had done in the previous 2 games. I thought he looked very settled. As you say, Ashwin not there, Jadeja being looked after. You know Bumrah's only going to bowl 5 or 6 overs. So the situation was the key thing there. So I agree. I think that's, you know, obviously what happened subsequent to that with the collapse of wickets put a little bit more focus on the shot, didn't it? If England had gone on, if Duckett had gone on, if Stokes had gone on and Bairstow, it would have slightly camouflaged the shot. But because of the collapse, it put all the focus on the shot. But I think first innings is where they lost it. We brushed over Duckett. Just a quick reflection. I mean, that was a fantastic exhibition of batting from him on the second day.
It was, and again, a tick for the Sky Cricket Podcast. We got him on the first half.
He said to us he's got 10 sweep shots. I reckon I saw about 15 on that day.
How well has he played, and did he play? And we talked about his struggles in Bangladesh and in India on the previous in 2016, and how he's worked and what his mindset was, and his mindset from when Alistair Cook told him in Vizag, just survive. And he looked at Cookie as if to say, that's not my game. I need to put pressure back on the bowlers. So for everything in Joe Root, does Joe Root need to play Bazball? Does he need to play the reverse scoops? The flip side of that with Ben Duckett is absolutely he needs to. That is his game. He needs to be, for him, definitely the sweep shot is just as good, if not better, than the forward defence. First test against Ravi Ashwin, he played a forward defence, was out LBW, so he might as well sweep, reverse sweep, play all the funky sweep shots. It was quite brilliant. It was dramatic. Watching here in England, you know, it was unbelievable the way he put world-class spinners under pressure. It was just a joy to watch. And like you say, you went to bed that evening thinking, everything is right about Bazball. This is exactly what they are. Put pressure back on the bowlers, make Rohit think about his fields. It was one of the great, I don't know where you'd rank it, but it was one of the great hundreds I've seen in Test match cricket, and one of the great comebacks from a lad who had struggled out there on his last tour to what he had done in that innings. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, an incredible performance from Ben Duckett. I mean, some of the shots that he played one, that reverse hit off Jadeja for 6, that so reminded me of the Ben Stokes shot at Headingley off Nathan Lyon towards the end of that famous game in the Ashes. It was an amazing exhibition. And as you say, that's you always have to hold that in mind when any criticisms come after a defeat like this. And no team should be immune from criticism. But the performances that Stokes and McCullum have dragged out of some of England's cricketers compared to where they were before, I think speaks volumes for this team and their leadership of this team. And that always has to be borne in mind. Shall we switch to India? I mean, it was a terrific performance of character from India, particularly with Ravi Ashwin when he, left the Test match on the second evening, flew to Chennai. They put on a charter for him, so they're coming to the ground down to 10 men, up against it a little bit, and therefore the turnaround. As much as we focused on England, we should focus on India as well. I mean, a couple of great performances from young players. Let's pick on young Sarfaraz first of all, who has had to wait for his opportunity for 10 years. I mean, he's averaging just shy of 70 in 10 years of Ranji Trophy cricket, knocking on the selector's door with brilliant performances. And they finally picked him. They couldn't really ignore him for too much longer. A great moving ceremony with his father when he was presented with the cap. And then he just took to it, didn't he? He played brilliantly.
He did, and his tempo of batting, I mean, we've touched on it. It would have been harder for him to come in had Root taken that catch at slip at 47 for 4. Then you'd debate, can he play with that sort of tempo and flair and style, and would he have to block it for a little while? But coming in at 240 for 4 absolutely gives you license. He looks a very fine player of spin. He picks up length very well. He slog sweeps and sweeps very well. He's obviously done the hard yards in first-class cricket, got a shed load of runs, and people have been singing his praises for quite some time. So he was not going to be like a novice coming in. He's got the weight of first-class runs. But you never know when someone arrives on the biggest stage and you've had to wait so long, it's the character, and can he do it on that biggest stage? Small sample size, but it definitely looks like he can. It's not just the runs in both innings. It's the way he got those runs. They were eye-catching.
He was absolutely barbecued by Ravindra Jadeja in that first innings. Now, I was looking at the statistics here of run-outs. Now, Jadeja has been involved in 9 run-outs in his Test match career for India. He himself has survived those run-outs 8 times and has only been run out once. That is not dissimilar to your statistics, actually, Nas. You were involved in 8 run-outs with England in Test cricket, and your mate at the other end had to depart 7 times, and you only once. I reckon Jadeja gets away with it because he's fast. He's super fast. You got away with it because you were selfish.
Exactly. No, exactly the same with me. I'm pleased to be compared with Ravindra Jadeja. Thank you very much. B, that one run out where I was run out was in Antigua, where Thorpe completely barbecued me. And the only good thing to come out of that run out was that you resigned at the end of that Test match because we lost. So something good came out of that. He was absolutely stuffed. Jadeja looking for that single to get him to 100. Rohit's reaction on the balcony as well, throwing his cap down in absolute disgust. I enjoyed some of Rohit's
animated, actually, Rohit in the game. He threw his cap down at that moment. And then yesterday, when the 2 young lads decided to take it upon themselves to walk off in anticipation of a declaration, he kind of waved them back on and said, get on with it.
Yeah, I thought we touched on that third day. I thought his captaincy was good in that third day with a man down. I thought some of the field settings he set were better. I thought almost like the break came at a good time on the second evening. He looked a bit sort of bamboozled and sort of frazzled, a little bit like Cummins did in the Ashes at times. That what do we do here with Bazball? They're going at 6 and over. How do I stop this? And it's almost like the break came. Let's rethink our fields, our plans. I thought Kuldeep, in the absence of Ashwin, was excellent. The control and the spin and the variation. Jadeja got better and better with every spell. Siraj came into it a lot more as the game progressed. So I thought for them, for everything England collapsing, whatever it was, 95 for 8, I do think you have to give India credit for the way they, a man down, came back into the game.
Yeah, in a way, Ashwin's absence meant that they had to give a prolonged spell to some bowlers. I mean, obviously, if Kuldeep had got knocked around, he'd have brought Jadeja on. But you're right, Siraj bowled a lengthy spell. Kuldeep bowled 12 overs that morning, and I thought he bowled beautifully, actually. On a luckier day, he might have got 4 or 5 wickets. He passed the bat frequently. Why is it curious, isn't it? Why there've been so few successful left arm wrist spinners? I was looking at the stats. It's only really Paul Adams who, in recent years has got a bundle of wickets as a left arm wrist spinner. And you'd think in a T20 era when wrist spinners come to the fore, you'd think there'd be more left arm wrist spinners about who've had a crack at Test cricket, but not so
Yeah.
many. I mean, Kuldeep's first Test was 2017. This is only his 10th in 7 years. I mean, I know Ashwin and Jadeja there, so it makes it difficult for him, but he's a rarity.
Yeah, maybe control. I don't know. It's not an easy art, but you'd say that about right arm wrist spin. And it brings us on to a point I want to touch on a little bit. And we've, applauded the way England spinners have bowled, but I think it's been noticeable in the last couple of games. The first game, which spun big, I think your control of length, there's a bit more margin for error when it's spinning big. I think as the pitches get flatter, I do think you need a bit more control. And I don't know how you saw it on the ground, but it has become more noticeable that and they are a different level at the amount of cricket they've played, Jadeja, Ashwin, and even Kuldeep. But England spinners and young, inexperienced spinners, their control of length is not where it needs to be. And I was a bit taken aback by Ryan Ahmed's comments between tests. I know it was in a press conference. He's a young lad, but something like it's boring bowling maidens, and I understand what he's trying to do. But really, it reminded me a little bit of the Zach Crawley comment that Brendan McCullum came up with. His game's not suited to being consistent. Really, well, try and get a bit more consistent. Rayan, Tom Hartley, try and get a bit more consistent. Enjoy bowling maidens, because that's another way of getting wickets. So in an era of Bazball, I understand what they're trying to say, but really I would like improvement as well. Not just say that's the way we are, we don't bowl maidens. Just try and look at the opposition and try and improve.
Yeah, I mean, Shane Warne, our late great friend, used to say that actually when the pitch was spinning, you'd set aggressive fields, but you'd actually bowl defensively. You'd say have attacking fields, but bowl defensively. And what he meant by that was just bowl accurately.
Yeah.
Which, of course, he was the greatest there's ever been, and he was able to do that. And totally unfair to compare, but I think that should be the aim. There's nothing boring about bowling accurately, particularly when the pitches are spinning. But I think you're right. And I mentioned this before the tour, if there were going to be rank turners, that actually brings England spinners into the game. The likes of Tom Hartley, who picked up 7 wickets in Hyderabad when it spun a bit more. On pitches that only offer a little bit of spin, it accentuates the difference in quality. And of course, India have got much more quality and much more experience and wickets behind them. What about young Jaiswal yesterday? I reckon Jimmy was feeling every one of his 41 years when he was being slapped around that afternoon.
Yeah, I had Rishabh Pant memories about it, wasn't it? Reverse scooping and sweeping and flat. And, it was just, Jaiswal for me has just been a wow moment. He has just been unbelievable. And again, I've just talked about how England spinners can learn from Indian spinners. I think some of England's batters can learn from Jaiswal. He is attacking. He is hitting sixes for fun. I sit at home and I watch cricket still as a batter and think, what shot would I have played? So the moment England spinners get it above the eye line, I pick that up and Jaiswal picks that up and belts it out of the ground. Literally every time I sit at home going, oh, he's tossed that up, Jaiswal belts it out of the ground. I've not seen, you'd have to go back to Vinod Kambli or Sidhu when you played on that tour, or Verinder Sehwag. Some of the great hitters of spin, I think you would put this young lad in. And I said on a previous podcast we've done, he's got that hunger from moving as a 12-year-old boy and living on Azad Maidan in a tent. He's got that hunger and discipline, but he's also got that IPL hitting potential and flair. And that is a dangerous combination, as England are finding out. 2 double hundreds and big runs. And that's why England, play the way you are, but have a look at this lad. He's playing attacking, but he's making it count. He's sitting in. First hour, he didn't go after England. Second hour, he went after their spinners. So a brilliant performance from him.
I wanted to touch on a little bit one or two of the things that England's players say. I mean, the way these things happen is there is a daily press conference, as you know, at the end of each day's play, and the captain speaks before and after. And I always find the press conferences a difficult thing because you have to take players at their word, what they say in a press conference, but equally you understand from their perspective that it's not always easy. They don't want to sound negative or defeatist, so sometimes they have to slightly go over the top, don't they, in what they say? And I mean, I picked up on Ben Duckett, who came to the press conference on the third day and said something like, "The more the better. They can have as many as they want." And we'll go and get them. And do you think that they actually believe that, or is that just they just don't want any negativity in anything they say, and therefore it's about the messaging, and therefore we should just be take it all with a pinch of salt?
Uh, Neither really, and I don't mean that. A bit of both, in as much as I think it's completely about messaging. I think if you're in and around that camp with McCullum and Stokes and Key, and the whole setup is a positive messaging. Don't doubt yourself. If in doubt, take the positive approach. Everything, even when someone gets out for a naught, I think McCullum will turn to him in the corner of the dressing room and go, "I like that shot today. Go out and do it better tomorrow." So I think when you're living in an environment and a bubble that has got so much good messaging and positive vibes and positive messaging, I think you then go into a press conference and you're never going to step back and go, "Oh, well, they may have got too many and we're just going to play for a draw." It's a lot better than some of the old cliches that used to come up, "We're hitting them well in the nets," and, that sort of stuff. So I enjoy their positivity, but there has to be a little bit of realism in there as well. So the second part of your comment there is, should we just let them off? I don't think you should just let them off. They're obviously chasing 600 in India, batting last, is not a particularly good option to look at.
Well, you prefer to chase 200 than 600, put it that way.
Yeah, that's a deep cricketing knowledge there. So the comment on Jaiswal, he's learned from us. Again, I'm going to touch on that. No, he's not learned from you. He's learned from, as I say, his upbringing and all the hard yards he had to put in growing up, and he's learned from IPL. If anything, lads, have a look at him and learn from him. So whatever they're saying in public and in that dressing room, I hope they're going back to their room and just a little bit of a self-introspection and going, "Yeah, I can look at that lad and learn from him. I can improve." It's not, otherwise it does become a cult, doesn't it? At times, Bazball and this regime have been described as a cult where you cannot criticise either within or externally. This is the way we play. I go back to the Ashes series. I reckon they changed because of their skipper, Stokes, and the way he batted at Lords. Play the situation at times as well. Even in this regime, there's room for learning and improving.
Yeah, I mean, the one area I really do agree with Ben Stokes when he was talking after the game actually is about outside opinion. He got a little bit of criticism for that, I think. The fact that he said, we don't listen to outside opinion. I think that's a good thing. From my perspective, and I'd be interested to know what you think about this as a former captain, I think it's very easy to get sidetracked by so many voices, and particularly these days with the nature of the media as it is, perhaps far more. There's far more outlets than there were when we were playing, with social media and podcasts and God knows what. I think if you start listening to all the voices out there, you start to doubt yourself, you start to get sidetracked, which is not to say that you can't listen and learn, but I do think that kind of the only voices that really do matter to a player should be your captain and your coach. I don't think the players should be listening to this podcast or any podcast, or indeed reading comment in the papers or listening to the commentary or the analysis that we might do on Sky. I think that is a shortcut to a bit of a nightmare where your mind can get scrambled. So I do agree. And Mikey Holding always used to say that to me, actually. He said in the West Indies dressing room, he said he did not care what people were saying, what people were writing. He listened to Clive Lloyd and Viv Richards, his captains, and that's what mattered to him. And I do think that's an important thing, to try and block out all the outside noise.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I'm glad you brought up Mikey Holding there, because it's the stubbornness, and that's what makes Ben Stokes.
The other day.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, happy birthday, Mikey. But that stubbornness of Stokes, I think, and I mean it in a nice way, I think it makes him the captain that he is, because he doesn't listen to outside noise. He doesn't doubt himself in the same way that Owen Morgan, when he, the two great turnarounds in English cricket over the last 15 years, decade, or whatever, has been Owen Morgan's white ball side and Ben Stokes' red ball side. And why has that happened? Because they were stubborn and they believed in what they were doing, that they weren't going to be sidetracked by comments about, you shouldn't be bowled out in 45 overs in a white ball game. That's nonsense. We've moved away from that. Stokes, now he won't listen to the outside noise. The only thing, and I reiterate this, you mentioned two noises and two voices you should listen to, the coach, the captain. There is another voice, and that is the one in your head. There'll be the one in your head that tells you, and you think about how you're going to become a better player. That's the other voice you have to listen to. You have to ask yourselves questions at the end of every test match, every test tour. What could I have done better to give us a better chance to succeed? And whatever the captain and coach is doing, how do I improve as a cricketer? I think that's the other voice you need to listen to.
Having said he shouldn't listen to us, he clearly hasn't listened to your excellent analysis on DRS, which you did a couple of years ago in the studio from memory, because he's actually been quite strong. He wants to get rid of umpire's call. Now, I believe, like you in the piece that you did, that umpire's call is necessary because there may be a margin of error there, and you're talking about an extrapolation, something that hasn't happened, and therefore you need to build in that margin of error. And I think actually DRS works well. When you compare to the nonsense in football and all the talk about VAR, DRS has been one of the triumphs, actually, of the ICC, I think, in cricket. And I'm happy with how it works. But clearly, the England camp, or the captain, at least, less so.
Yeah, I haven't changed my mind on DRS and umpire's call. I think it's there to back up and to not back up the umpire. But because of the margin of error in technology, I did that video. I haven't changed my mind one bit on that, to be honest. The only thing I'd say that has changed slightly in the last couple of years, there's been a tinkering of the law with DRS in the height. So some of these LBWs that do look high, and Crawley did look high, and Pope looked high, but actually 2 years ago they changed it to include the top of the bails as well. Now, I think Ben's other point, and I've been trying to look on my phone and having a look at it, he said on the video analysis of the Crawley, it actually showed to be missing, and the match referee had said there was an anomaly there. Now, you can't have that. You can't be putting out pictures of the ball missing the stumps and it's saying umpire's call. So with that, I completely agree with Stokes. But in my opinion, regarding umpire's call, I think it is needed because that ball hasn't hit the stumps. It's just a projection.
100 tests for Ben, of course. And in fact, during the test match, he bowled quite a lot ahead of the game, and just in one of his comments opened up the possibility that he might bowl again towards the end of this series. It was a great game for Ravindra Jadeja, another one of the great all-rounders, modern-day all-rounders, but also during the game, the sad news about Mike Proctor, who passed away in Durban after some complications. I mean, neither of us are old enough to have played against Mike Proctor. I do remember watching him those early days of, John Player League and Benson and Hedges Cups, an absolutely brilliant all-rounder. There was a famous game at Old Trafford that ended in the dark at about 9:10 when they held the BBC News back to finish a game between Gloucestershire and Lancashire that Procky played in. And those who did play with him and against him said that he was one of the great all-rounders. Obviously, his test career was curtailed because South Africa was stopped from playing international cricket because of apartheid. So I think he only played 7 test matches. But those who did see him play say he was one of the great all-rounders. So we should mention him and pass on our condolences to him and his family. And he was the match referee, actually, when South Africa... No, match referee. He was the manager when South Africa came back. I mentioned that whopping defeat that we had at Lord's when I was captain. And Procky was their manager and famously put the South African flag and draped it over the Lord's balcony on that day.
Reading everyone talking about him in the last week, he seemed I didn't know him particularly well. I'd met him around cricket grounds and stuff. Seemed a really, really great guy, and must have been a nightmare to face. And glorious Gloucestershire, it was in the old days where you didn't just get an overseas player that came in and popped in and out like they do now. He was part of Gloucestershire folklore and cricket, and will be sadly missed in those parts. One of the true great all-rounders, and must have been a nightmare to face. If you think of Bumrah and his stuttering, Procky coming in, bowling off the wrong foot with in-swinging Yorkers at 90 mile an hour, my word, he must have been a nightmare to face.
Yeah, they used to call Gloucestershire Proctorshire. He was that influential in that team. And you can still see bits of footage actually on YouTube. And there's a great bit of footage where he's come round the wicket bowling at Hampshire, and he gets, I think, Greenwich and Richards, and he gets 4 in 5. And he's steaming in round the wicket, ducking them back in. So, yeah, it must have been a bit of a nightmare to face. Right, Ranchi, we're moving on to Ranchi. Thankfully, time has passed slow in Rajkot, I have to say.
Did you get a beer at all week or not? Nothing.
No, it's been a week of vegetarian food, which has been absolutely fantastic, I have to say. But a dry week in more ways than one here in Ranchi for me. So in Rajkot, looking forward to getting to Ranchi. I did go to the Mahatma Gandhi Museum, actually, just down the road. It's 15 minutes walk from the hotel here at Lemon Tree. And that was fascinating. But looking forward to getting to Ranchi, to the hometown of MS Dhoni. I've never been there before. I've no idea what to expect, either from the town or the cricket stadium and the pitch. So all a bit of an unknown quantity. But England have got some issues, Nas, to deal with. I mean, it's a way ahead. We don't know what the pitch is like, but just throwing it forward a little bit, they've got some decisions to make around the bowling unit, and in particular, Wood and Anderson playing back-to-back tests because the batsmen didn't give the bowlers a lot of time to rest. They were out there bowling on consecutive days, and they looked pretty flat by that final afternoon. So they've got some issues there. And I suppose Johnny Bairstow, who's short of runs, there's no Harry Brook, obviously, but Dan Lawrence is waiting in the wings. I mean, every instinct tells me that England will stick with their batting lineup, but they might just rejig things and freshen up the bowling.
We need Beefy and Bob, don't we? 120 all out, and you get rid of the bowlers and keep all the same batters that have gone down really well. It's the fact that Durham, in the same way that Bumrah might be rested for Ranchi, it's the fact of what comes next after that, and that it's Dharamshala, the last Test match, which obviously we don't know what it's like at this time of year, but when we were there for the World Cup, that went through and generally aids a bit of seam at altitude, so that you'd want your quicker bowlers back for that. But that would mean Bumrah playing 5 in a row, and it would mean Anderson and Wood. Anderson playing 4, Wood playing 2 or 3 in a row. So if they were going to rest him, it would be this one, but England are 2-1 down. And Wood in particular, I don't think we've touched on it enough. Wood had an excellent Test match with ball and bat towards the end. So it's one of those nightmare situations as a skipper, 2-1 down, and you're needing to win. You just want to play your best side, and you don't want to look too far ahead. So just look at the conditions. One thing this side have done well is look at the conditions and just react to the conditions in front of them and not plan too far ahead. What do you think of the Johnny Bairstow situation? He is very short of runs. If he did play the next 2 games, Dharamshala would be his 100th. Would it be a case of play 2 tests and then we'll make a decision on Johnny Bairstow, or should you bring that forward?
Well, I think they'll stick with him, and I think they probably should stick with him. He's been so central to this project in a way. You know, if they left him out now at a critical juncture, everything they've done is about trying to give their players security and a feeling of, we're in this team and we're going to be back to the hilt. So we'll wait and see. Who knows what will happen? But all my instincts tell me they're likely to stick with him. Dan Lawrence has had no cricket. I mean, it's a ridiculous argument to use because you can never get any cricket unless you play, because these days there's no cricket in between the Test matches. And Johnny has looked, he's not quite got going here, but I think they'll back that experience and his ability. I think they'll back him to come good. and obviously Root as well. They'll hope that he comes good. So that my instincts would say they'll freshen up the bowling. That they may bring in Robinson for Anderson. They may think about Atkinson for Wood, and they'll kind of stick with the same batting lineup. But we shall see. So I'm off to Ranchi tomorrow. And we've got 2 or 3 days prep there ahead of that game. Looking forward to getting there and getting out of Rajkot, which I think is probably twinned with Chelmsford, given the lack of opportunities to get out and about and do stuff. So looking forward to getting.
I Google Ranchi, what to do in Ranchi, and I had 500 answers: MS Dhoni, MS Dhoni, MS Dhoni, and waterfalls. So if you've done 2 museums. Go out and look at the waterfalls of Ranchi and maybe go up and find MS Dhoni and do a great article on MS, who tends to keep himself to himself. Good luck with that.
I think he's prepping actually for IPL. I'm not sure he's going to be in town.
Right.
So I think he's elsewhere prepping. Anyway, I'll catch up with you. We're not doing this is our preview, isn't it, before Ranchi? So I'm going to catch up with you on the far side.
Can't wait.
All right. See you then.